Russia's automobile industry has collapsed. Factories are shut, assembly lines are dead, and more than 500,000 workers have already been fired, furloughed, or quietly erased from payrolls. This didn't happen over years. It didn't unfold gradually. It happened all at once. Plants that once ran around the clock stopped producing anything at all. Shifts were canceled permanently. Paychecks disappeared before workers were told why. Today, at MRwarfare, we're about to expose something far bigger than factory shutdowns, a reality Russia never wanted you to connect. Now look at it clearly. This wasn't a downturn. It wasn't a recession. It was a full industrial shutdown. When the last conveyor belt stopped moving, the Russian economy didn't slow down. It lost a limb. This wasn't a market correction. It was a functional amputation. An industry that anchored entire regions vanished without a single missile strike. Not because demand collapsed, not because workers failed, but because the system that made production possible no longer existed, and the effects were immediate. Jobs disappeared before official statements were written. Single industry cities lost their economic backbone overnight. The economy didn't shrink, it disconnected. This is where the failure becomes political, because this outcome wasn't an accident. It was the result of a decision taken at the very top. The belief that Russia could isolate itself industrially and still function like a modern economy. Vladimir Putin didn't miscalculate a battlefield. He miscalculated systems. He assumed factories could keep running without global supply chains, that foreign manufacturers could be removed without collapsing the structure they held together, that production could be nationalized without consequences. That assumption was wrong. Modern industry doesn't fail slowly. It fails instantly the moment one irreplaceable input disappears. And when that happened, the state didn't just lose output, it lost control, because once factories stop, everything else follows. Employment, consumption, regional stability, trust. What we're watching now is not decline. It's the aftermath of a system that stopped working all at once and never restarted. The shutdown of Russia's auto industry wasn't caused by a lack of workers. It wasn't caused by a lack of factories. And it wasn't caused by a lack of money. It was caused by dependence. Modern car manufacturing is not a national industry. It is a global system disguised as a factory. Every vehicle rolling off an assembly line is the final product of thousands of invisible agreements, licensing deals, software permissions, certified components, safety compliance, and just-in-time deliveries that cross borders dozens of times before a single bolt is tightened. That system has no redundancy, and that is where the fatal mistake was made. The Kremlin believed Russia's industrial base could function as a silo, that production could be localized, insulated, and protected from global pressure. That belief might have worked decades ago. It does not work now. Before the war, Russia's auto industry was functionally dependent on foreign supply for nearly everything that mattered. Not just advanced microchips, but airbags, brake systems, emission controls, specialty steel grades, certified industrial coatings, diagnostic software, calibration tools. These are not optional upgrades. They are the structural skeleton of a modern vehicle. When sanctions hit, that skeleton was removed. The withdrawal of companies like Renault, Mercedes, Ford, and their supplier networks didn't just remove capital. It removed permission to use proprietary designs, permission to access certified components, permission to operate inside a global compliance system. Factories didn't lose partners. They lost legality. They lost the ability to produce a modern car that could be sold, insured, financed, or exported, and there was no alternative. Import substitution was never a strategy. It was a slogan. You cannot replace a supply chain perfected over decades with domestic production in months. You cannot recreate certification regimes, software stacks, testing protocols, and liability frameworks by decree. The system didn't slow down. It seized. Once the first shipment failed to arrive, the math became brutal. No airbags meant no certification. No certification meant no sales. No sales meant no production. From that moment forward, output didn't decline. It collapsed. This wasn't unforeseen. The vulnerability was known. The dependence was documented. But the assumption was that pressure could be absorbed. That industry would bend. Instead, it snapped. Because in modern manufacturing, sovereignty doesn't come from ownership. It comes from integration. And the moment Russia chose isolation, it chose industrial shutdown. This is where the collapse deepens beyond factories and into behavior. Because once an industrial system shuts down, the damage doesn't stop at production. It spreads into decision-making. Businesses stop planning. Banks stop lending. Households stop committing. When 500,000 stable jobs disappear in a single sector, risk perception across the economy changes overnight. Executives cancel expansion plans. Suppliers shorten contracts. Local governments delay infrastructure spending. Nothing dramatic happens. No alarms. Just hesitation. And hesitation is lethal to complex economies. Factories don't just produce cars. They anchor credit lines, long-term leases, municipal bonds, and pension contributions. When factories shut, those financial relationships don't unwind cleanly. They decay. Loans go unpaid. Budgets shrink. Maintenance is deferred. This is the invisible phase of collapse where numbers still appear on screens, but circulation slows underneath. Money doesn't vanish. It freezes, and frozen money starves everything connected to it. This is why the shutdown of a single industry destabilizes unrelated sectors. Construction stalls. Transport firms downsize. Retail thins out. The shock moves sideways. And once it does, recovery stops being a policy question. It becomes a confidence problem. Because confidence doesn't return when factories reopen. It returns when people believe reopening will last. In Russia's case, that belief is gone. Investors don't see a pause. They see an exit. Workers don't see restructuring. They see replacement. And when expectations shift that far, systems don't reset. They reroute. The human cost arrived next quietly. More than 500,000 workers were fired, furloughed, or indefinitely sidelined across the auto sector and its supply web. This wasn't announced as mass unemployment. It was disguised. Temporary stoppages, rotational leave, partial pay, administrative downtime. But none of those words change the outcome. These jobs are gone, and the most damaging part isn't the number. It's the type of worker being erased. This wasn't a purge of unskilled labor. The auto industry doesn't run on that. The people being pushed out were engineers, quality control specialists, tooling experts, process auditors, logistics planners, highly trained assembly technicians, human capital that takes decades to build and seconds to lose. Once they leave, factories don't just lose labor, they lose memory. And memory doesn't return. Subsidies can keep people idle. They cannot keep skills relevant. While workers sit at home, certifications lapse, processes decay, standards drift, technology moves on, and those who can leave do. Engineers don't wait. Managers don't wait. They move to Moscow, to St. Petersburg, or out of the country entirely. The damage multiplies outward. For every job lost on the factory floor, several more vanish around it. Suppliers, transport firms, maintenance crews, local service businesses. The real impact isn't 500,000 people. It's easily double that. And this is where the collapse turns demographic. Single industry cities don't adapt. They empty. Families leave. Birth rates fall. Schools lose students. Hospitals lose funding. The tax base erodes month by month. This is not dramatic. It's terminal. You can subsidize a factory. You cannot subsidize a city back to life once people leave. The social contract fractures here. For years, stability was exchanged for obedience. That stability depended on predictable work. That promise is now broken. Not because of ideology, not because of protest, because the work disappeared. And once a region internalizes that its future has been deleted, it doesn't wait for permission to unravel. It drains. The irreversibility becomes clearer when you examine how production actually works. A car is not built. It is assembled. Manufacturing is a logistics problem, not a labor problem. A single vehicle contains thousands of components arriving in sequence, on time, with no margin for error. Factories don't store inventory for months. They depend on motion. When that motion stops, factories die. After sanctions hit, the Kremlin pushed import substitution. That idea was never viable. Take the electronic control unit, the brain of a modern car. It governs fuel injection, braking, airbags, stability systems, emissions, diagnostics. It requires microchips, designed in one country, fabricated in another, tested in a third, using equipment built elsewhere. Russia does not control that chain. Without it, ECU production collapses to zero. Without an ECU, a modern car cannot exist. This is why production didn't downgrade gracefully. It regressed. Cars were stripped of essential systems. No airbags, no anti-lock brakes, no stability control. These are not cost-cutting measures. They are admissions of failure. Such vehicles cannot compete globally. They cannot be exported. They cannot anchor an industry. They cannot rebuild trust. This is not a shortage, it's a logistics heart attack. And the gray market solution makes it worse. Parallel imports introduce inconsistent quality, legal exposure, insurance problems, and consumer distrust. Each attempt to restart production increases instability. Supply chains don't forgive interruptions, they reallocate. Even if sanctions vanish tomorrow, those suppliers would not return. They've already adapted. This is why the collapse is irreversible, not because factories were destroyed, but because the invisible system that fed them is gone. The vacuum didn't stay empty. China moved in, not as a partner. As a replacement, Chinese manufacturers flooded the market with inventory. Cheap, accessible, rapidly approved vehicles. Russia didn't lose market share. It lost producer status. Badge engineering created the illusion of domestic production. But ownership, technology, and control remained foreign. This isn't cooperation, it's dependency. Once consumers adapt, they don't go back. Once supply chains reorient, they don't snap back. Even if the war ended tomorrow, the industry would still be dead. China doesn't need to pressure Russia. Replacement is enough. Every imported vehicle tightens the dependency loop. Every spare part reinforces it. Every software update deepens it. Control without ownership. This is the end state. Russia still functions, but at a lower tier. Factories may reopen. Assembly lines may restart. But the ecosystem that made them competitive is gone. This is not a cycle, it's a downgrade. And once a country drops out of the top layer of global production, re-entry is not guaranteed. The collapse didn't arrive as a headline. It arrived as a condition, and conditions don't end with speeches. They end when systems change or when generations do. So the real question isn't about recovery timelines or official statements. It's this: when a country stops building and starts relying, how long does it take before people stop expecting anything different? That's the shift worth watching. We don't follow headlines. We follow fault lines. Stay aware.